Ladies and gentlemen, happy 4th of July. God bless you all. Check this out, and we'll talk about there are specific loopholes pertaining to President Trump running or becoming president somehow in 2028. He can become the vice president. J.D. Vance's vice president can resign. Trump can become vice president, then president again. That's an NPR article. I'm not making it up. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Check this out. We'll look at the NPR article. We'll look at the big, beautiful bill. Hope you had a big, beautiful 4th of July today. God bless you all. Check this out. Hit subscribe if you're new.
People are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that. But I have not looked into it. I want to do a fantastic job. We have 4 years, just about, almost close to 4 years.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear President Trump again in a second. Hit subscribe to this channel. Happy 4th of July to everybody. And what can I tell you? Other than there is a way for President Trump to become president again in 2028. Is it likely? No. So for people at any time in the future, perhaps an imbecile that wants to take my words or the theme of this live stream out of context, do I think it's going to happen? Very unlikely. Do I think it's possible? Yes. Are the Democrats so dreadful in terms of approval rating that it is possible? Yeah, it is possible. It very well is possible. Not likely, but it's possible. What Trump has said, what the 22nd Amendment says, 22nd Amendment ordinarily would stop President Trump, but in a 1999 Minnesota Law Review article called "The Twice and Future President" explained that a twice elected president could become vice president. And then if the current president were to be removed from office, resign, return as commander-in-chief. A federal sanctioned record of interpretations of the Constitution. So there are other ways as well. But the key word here is elected. So in the 22nd Amendment restriction, you can't have a person elected 3 times, okay, or 3 times in a row, or just 3 times, period. But here, ladies and gentlemen, the issue is the following. President Trump can become vice president somehow and then become president. I mean, Democrats who are more, horrified at this, they're okay with Biden winning his own primary and then being usurped by his vice president. So the Democratic Party, they just made up rules, out of nowhere, and so for people who think that this is impossible, it's outlandish, why did Harris become the Democratic nominee when Biden won his primary? So if you think that this is not, just or right or, shouldn't take place, if you are a wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat, and you're saying this is just undemocratic and it's unconstitutional and it shouldn't have taken place. How did Harris become the Democratic nominee? She didn't win a primary. She never won a primary. So how did she become the Democratic nominee? Hit subscribe to this channel. Check this out.
Yes, heads blowing off shoulders all over the United States. Joining me now, Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor, constitutional law expert. All right, Jonathan, in an interview with NBC News, the president told your friend Kristen Welker that there are methods in which he could do this, including having J.D. Vance run, then passing the role over. Now, what is really possible? Is there any scenario other than a constitutional amendment under which the president could serve basically a third term?
Well, there's also entering a parallel universe and coming back. These are all possibilities, but not very likely. This is a president who loves to give a snake in a can to the media just to watch them open it. And he's doing that. This is another jump scare that has just lit up the internet. This has been long a parlor game among presidents, whether you could any president get around the 22nd Amendment. The problem is the 22nd Amendment is pretty clear. I mean, some people have argued that because the 22nd Amendment refers to someone who was twice elected, that only applies to people who run for the office, not serve those terms. That seems a rather large stretch. But the problem is to do that. It's called a handoff scenario where you have someone like Vance get elected, then he hands it back to Trump, is that in order to be vice president under the 12th Amendment, you have to be eligible to be president. And the problem is that you're not if you've been elected twice. So you'd have trouble being a vice presidential candidate, which means that many states would keep you off the ballot. But there's also a cost to this that may not be fair to people like Vance or others who are going to run, in that all of this talk tends to diminish them. Part of Trump's legacy will be securing the White House for a Republican, and this type of talk reduces figures like Vance to sort of mini-me's, and that's not a good thing for them.
Right now, however, Vance, Rubio, DeSantis, they're all mini-me's of Trump, although Vance is, he's in the best position. He's in the best possible position to take over after President Trump in 2028. He's a Trump Republican. He understands that he has to put the country before anything else. So he wants to bring manufacturing back. People don't understand why Trump is so popular. He wants to end never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts, and God bless all the veterans and soldiers watching this channel right now. When people say, "Oh, well, he engaged in military strikes," like he's an American president, he's not a pacifist. The difference is that Democrats, Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Clinton, Biden, Kerry, any Democrat would send American soldiers anywhere in the world because their intel agencies told them to do so. Trump will not do that. There is zero risk of Trump sending Americans to patrol the streets of Tehran, for example. That's what Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld did. Okay, and I love how history has been rewritten to absolve the Bush administration of exactly what they were guilty of, which is starting the era of never-ending wars and military conflict, 25 years or 24 years. They started that era, and Trump is cementing an end to it. So he's against sending Americans. That's the issue. That's what makes him an anti-war president. If you don't understand that, potentially you might be an imbecile. Who knows? I'm joking around, but a lot of Democrats don't get it. They just simply cannot comprehend how that could be anti-war. But that's the anti-war element. He wants to bring manufacturing back to the country, and he wants to enforce immigration laws. That's what makes President Trump President Trump. J.D. Vance, same thing. And so right now, even J.D. Vance isn't close to how important President Trump is in American politics. But there's zero equivalent of Vance in the Democratic Party. So, whereas the great Jonathan Turley stated he might not be eligible, potentially there might be a loophole regarding that. But in terms of the 22nd Amendment, the issue is elected. Even the NPR article talks about the fact that if he's the vice president and the president resigns, then there's an opening. Anyway, let's continue.
For them, it's not fair to people like Vance. So, this does appear something of a jump scare, but with the exception of amending the Constitution, it does not seem particularly credible.
Well, Professor, it seems like, again, he loves to tweak and tease and kind of get them the shiny object over here, and they'll run to that. But it plays into their tired refrain of Trump as the
Reality Autopsy, thank you. Thank you for watching for so long. I am so blessed to have a great number of people watching this channel that have been watching since 2017, 2018, when there was a profanity alert. If you remember the profanity alert, let me know in the chat. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Greatly appreciated. Reality, thank you so very, very much. Greatly appreciated.
Autocrat, Trump is the king. I mean, he is a duly elected president of the United States, but it plays into their narrative. That's all I'll say about that. So probably good to leave that to rest. And you're right. I think part of his amazing legacy will be the incredible cabinet he's had and J.D. Vance. I mean, that's an incredible legacy. 3 years from now, we'll see how that all plays out. Professor, thank you for educating us.
Should I run again? You tell me. There's your controversy right there. There's your controversy.
Oh boy. Looks like President Trump is listening to the voters as speculation grows around a possible third term. The Trump Organization's official website is now selling Trump 2028 merchandise. But watch this exchange between Axios and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The official Trump store is now selling hats that say Trump 2028, $50. Even though the Constitution doesn't envision a term 3 for President Trump or any Trump.
The Constitution doesn't envision? Why didn't he say the Constitution doesn't allow? Because there are potentially loopholes. Trump is popular enough for a third term. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Could it happen? Are Democrats, and I say there are a lot of wonderful, good liberal Democrats. I'm talking about the political party. The Democratic Party is so dreadfully unpopular. This is so miserably failed as a political party, okay, that they're so, the political party is so weak and inept that George Clooney, a Hollywood actor famous for his movies in the 90s and early 2000s, simply wrote an article, an op-ed, I think it was in the Washington Post, New York Times, and then Biden promptly stepped down after winning a primary. Here's the issue. They cheated Bernie Sanders, which was like a central, moment in my life, realizing that most of media and most of the American political system, or I should say most of media, is simply public relations. And that if you can cheat Bernie Sanders in 2016, anything is possible in 2024. We saw that with Biden winning a primary and then losing his candidacy to his vice president. Well, if like I said, if Democrats can do that, why can't Trump run? Why can't Trump run as a vice president or become vice president after Vance picks a vice president, wins the presidency? The vice president steps down. Trump becomes vice president. Vance steps down after a first term, because he wants to. I mean, that's the way Democrats roll in their primary. And the rebuttal will be, "That's just our primary." It's like, well, is that your version of democracy? I don't know. If it's okay for the Democratic primary, why wouldn't it be okay for the country? I'd love to hear an explanation from a wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat. Let's continue.
Or any president? Is that just a hat?
It's just a hat. The president was asked and answered this question yesterday. It's not something he's thinking of, though I hear the hats are flying off the shelves.
Trump spoke about a possible third term with Time magazine last week, saying he'd rather not discuss that now, but there are some well-known loopholes, and he doesn't believe in using loopholes. So, Kevin, one of these loopholes involves this scenario, that J.D. Vance would run with Donald Trump as his running mate.
Yep.
If they were to win, then J.D. Vance would immediately resign, and by succession, Donald Trump becomes president. Do you ever see that happening?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I mean, no, I don't see it happening. Wink, wink.
I agree with this gentleman 100%. I mean, is it likely? No. Could it happen? Yes. Trump is more popular than anyone in the Democratic Party by a factor of 10. It's not even close. So the average American likes Donald Trump. The favorability ratings, you can look at poll numbers, and you can put them in context. How did this man become a two-term president with 100% negative media coverage? If you become a two-term president with 95% negative media coverage, that means that you're far more popular than the average poll gives you credit for. That's just basic logic. It's the equivalent of running a 4.5 or 4.4 40-yard dash with a 100-pound backpack. But let's continue.
It depends, frankly, if the country's going great. But here's the thing. How old will Donald Trump be?
82.
82. He's not going to do this. I think he loves tweaking people. He'll sell a lot of hats and T-shirts. I don't see it happening. But if he could do it and if things are going great, he'd be the one guy to try.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Jason, the 22nd Amendment says you can only run twice.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump lives rent-free in a whole lot of liberals' minds. There are other Trumps out there. There's Donald Trump Jr., there's Eric Trump, there's Laura Trump, there's a lot of other Trumps, and there's even Barron Trump. That's right. So don't bet against Trumps. That's a pretty good bet.
Yeah, they're doing pretty well. There's a lot of them. So Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, spoke about the possibility of President Trump running for a third time. Let's hear what she had to say.
President Trump has served one full term. He's on his second full term. He's a very smart man, and I wish we could have him for 20 years as our president, but we'd have to look at the Constitution. It'd be a heavy lift.
Molly, she says it'd be a heavy lift.
She doesn't quite slam the door on it, though. You know what I mean? She's like kind of peeking through the door. I mean, Eric Trump did have the hat on the other day, and I think you're right about the living rent-free thing. There's a little bit of a troll going on here. Maybe partly it's supposed to be fun. It's also supposed to make money.
The issue also is that the Supreme Court has routinely sided with Trump. So the injunctions just recently on deportations and Doge, the Supreme Court routinely on religious freedom, a whole bunch of things. The Supreme Court routinely has backed President Trump. The reason is because the Democratic Party has routinely acted in an unconstitutional manner. So the Supreme Court is on President Trump's side. It could very well be, God forbid there could be a situation. I mean, I don't want anything like that. But if theoretically it is possible, I don't think it's likely, but it is possible.
Carolyn Levitt says it's flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the more interesting thing is, if he doesn't run again in the head of the ticket, does he stand there like Elon next to the desk, with whoever wins in the next administration? Does he promise to be, the right-hand man or the advisor? Or is that what goes on underneath the hat, the head, the people that might buy that hat? Is that what they want to see?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, how much does he love this?
I got to tell you, those will be selling like hotcakes. He's selling like hotcakes.
Does he love this?
So this right here, these images right here are like The Exorcist, Friday the 13th, all of them, Nightmare on Elm Street, every Saw, 25, all 25 of them, whatever. It's like every horror movie. It's the worst nightmare. It's the worst nightmare of highly educated, morally superior liberal Democrats. They would much rather have Biden, and God bless him, but stumbling and bumbling about, unable to, speak, and, the rest of the country and the world unable to really comprehend what he's saying. Again, God bless him, wish him only the best. But Democrats apparently didn't care much about him, Biden, or his presidency. He won his primary, and then what did they do? They catapulted his vice president. His vice president usurped him. So that's one way we can look also. Let's see. So there was a 1999 Minnesota Law Review article. The federal government-sanctioned record of interpretation of the Constitution also points to the possibility of a former two-term president serving as Speaker of the House. Yeah, but you wouldn't want the presidential succession. You wouldn't want that. God forbid. And so So that would be when you have NPR saying it's a possibility. Okay, let's look at the big, beautiful bill. Jim Jordan is going to explain why it leads to economic growth. I agree with Thomas Massey and Rand Paul that, you shouldn't pass legislation that increases the debt and deficit. But I have a question for Massey and Paul. Is the legislation that they would push for that doesn't increase the debt or deficit at all, will that lead to economic growth? And I'm not being flippant or, belligerent in any way. Unfortunately, the country is so big, we've had deficits for so long. And it's interesting, like Democrats routinely pass legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, all these. After they said inflation wasn't a big deal or didn't exist, then they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, that it was only temporary, they said. But all of their bills within 10 years increased the debt by $4 trillion. All of the estimates within every piece of legislation, almost every piece of legislation in Biden's tenure, increased the national debt and the deficit. So, and then suddenly you have the Washington Post, which, by the way, Trump is sending into bankruptcy. They're losing readership. They're losing members. Oh my God, the big beautiful bill is gonna, increase the deficit. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what Biden's legislation did, or Democrats under Biden, without growing the economy or without helping the economy. We had 21% price increases under Biden. 21%. And in every Democratic-run city, it's exponentially harder and more difficult because of interest rates to purchase a home. Well, let's continue.
Look who's here, House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan. Chairman, it's always great to see you again.
You too.
So what is happening now? Congressman Thomas Massey reported claims he has enough Republicans to block it in the House. I mean, with full attendance, you can't have more than 4.
And of course it passed, but this is before it passed.
Four GOP defections are going to sink the bill. What's happening right now?
I think, there are meetings going on, there are talks going on, just like Congressman Johnson mentioned. I think my colleagues are right. I think we get there. I think we get there because it is a good bill. And I always tell everyone, it's a good bill because Democrats hate it. The reason they hate it because it doesn't empower government. It actually empowers families. It empowers Americans, lets them keep more of their money, gives them school choice, makes sure our border stays secure, and says to able-bodied people in our welfare system who are getting your money and your viewers' money, guess what? You're going to have to work now. So it's just good common sense Republican basic principles that we have as a party that I think in the end that carries the day and this thing gets passed. So it'll take a while. It always does in this process, but I think we're going to get there.
What are the big sticking points now?
Well, I think obviously some of our members didn't like some of the changes that the Senate made, whether it was with the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which did all this stuff on the green energy stuff, the subsidies there. There was concerns about that. So that's the key. And I think just the overall that we maybe didn't cut enough spending, some members think. I agree we should cut more. But we got a small majority in both the House and Senate. And you got to kind of cobble together the votes. And so you moderates don't always want to cut as much as we conservatives do. And it's just how it works. So, again, I think with that tight of a small of a majority, this is probably as good as it's going to get. And I've said to my colleagues, and I respect them all, I've said, look, it was 50-50 in the Senate. The vice president had to come break the tie. And the two of the three votes on the Republican side against it were Senator Tillis, Senator Collins. Not exactly conservatives. Do you think it can get much more conservative when that's the lay of the land? I think it's difficult. So let's look at what a good bill this is, how it, I think, is going to help economic growth by letting people and businesses keep more of their money, invest that money, spend that money. I think it on balance is a pretty darn good piece of legislation that we should be supporting.
So we've got a third procedural vote coming up. Do you think it'll get through that?
Well, that's the big test. I think the rules actually may be a bigger test than the final passage. So I hope it does. That's what the talks are about. The other thing I think is important, and you had this at the top of the show where we talked about the president's approval ratings amongst Republicans. I mean, momentum is an important thing. It's important in sports, and it's certainly important in politics. The president's got record approval ratings. He's off this amazing, successful exercise in Iran. The NATO countries are anteing up more of their money to help pay for NATO. We got a border that's secure. The stock market is up, as you just pointed out. Things are moving in the right direction, and now we're going to stop a bill that cuts taxes for the families we get to represent. I just fail to see how that makes sense. So in the end, I think we get there because it's just good common sense and it's consistent with what we told the voters we were going to do. And I always say we make this job too complicated. What did we tell the voters we're going to do? If you get elected, go do that. President Trump does it better than anyone. And that's what we got to focus on.
Yeah, this would be a 4.6 trillion tax hike. I know one number's out there, 1.6 trillion, but all in, it's 4.6 trillion tax hike on the U.S. economy. You know, Democrats are trying to make hay, saying, you know, this is going to throw 16 million people off of Medicaid, but about half of that is able-bodied workers who just have to volunteer for 20 hours a week. That's 7.8 million. And then I think 1.3 million people are on Medicaid, and plus people could still get Obamacare. Can you break that down for the viewer?
So a lot of it is like the work requirement, or like you just heard, volunteering for a certain amount of hours per week. You never get the actual truth from the fact check and like the Rolling Stone, Washington Post articles, the typical apoplectic response to anything Trump or anything Republican. It's like they're not getting kicked off by and large. There's just more requirements. And if you're able-bodied, that's not a big deal. That's not a problem. That shouldn't be a problem. Also, huge tax cuts, border enforcement, everything the Democrats don't want. Okay, everything the average American wants. Nobody wants to pay. That's why Letitia James was accused of mortgage fraud. She wanted to pay less taxes, almost certainly in Virginia. That's the whole thing with the Letitia James mortgage situation. That's why she's under criminal investigation. This is the same attorney general that went after Trump for what she allegedly did. And with Trump's situation, he never deceived Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank literally testified on his behalf. You're not going to get a bank testifying on the behalf of Letitia James. So why, for example, why did she have allegedly her principal residence in Virginia? Because there's less taxes than New York. Why did she allegedly lie about a 4-unit building in Brooklyn, or I forgot where, Queens, I forgot exactly, in New York, as opposed to a 5 or 6-unit building? Because there's less tax burden. Okay? Democrats do not want to pay taxes. They just pretend that they care. They're morally superior. They love, just raise taxes. Like, well, not everybody pays the tax. Mitt Romney stated that tanked his campaign. 47%. What was that? Anyway, let's continue.
On why that 16 million number, it appears to be inflated.
Well, yeah, I mean, requiring people to work who are getting a benefit from the taxpayers when they're able-bodied, that is not kicking anyone off. That is called common sense. You work every day. I have to work. The families I get the privilege of representing, the 800,000 people in the 4th District of Ohio, they got to go to work. Why can't people who are on Medicaid, for goodness sake, to think of the 35-year-old able-bodied male and he's getting a benefit and not having to do a work or a work requirement or any type of volunteer activity? You got to be kidding me. Like, that's just crazy. So anyone with common sense understands that should happen. But Democrats say, oh, no, that's kicking people off.
So when you read the disingenuous articles, these people are being kicked off. That's not true. See, that's why media has dug its own proverbial grave. Like, nobody trusts media anymore because they're so in the tank for one political side. It's not about truth. Like, you read the Associated Press or Reuters, it's like they used to be at least less partisan or nonpartisan. It's so funny. You like read like the bios of the journalists of the New York Times, Washington Post. Like, we never donate to political campaigns. We're not registered either way. Yeah, your slant. Everything you write is written from the vantage point of Trump bad, Republicans horrible, Democrats good. even if you're not talking about Democrat or Republican, the editors, the writers, the journalists, the publication itself is leveled against Trump at all times. You're never going to get, oh, well, you know, if you're 30 plus years old or whatever, you're able-bodied, you're able to go ahead and do, you know, a couple hours of community service or whatever, you know, 20 hours, whatever it was in the week. That's not being kicked off of a government program. But again, to media, it's of course being kicked off. Oh my God. Oh, the cruel. Oh, Trump is so cruel. It's like, yet again, they're lying and they're not telling you the whole truth.
It's just flat out not true.
Okay, Chairman Jordan, we'll be following the vote. It's always so wonderful to see you.
They've taken this video because it teaches you how.
Here's what's at stake. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith. He's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He joins us now from Capitol Hill. Chairman, what's the latest? Because you got a few people, they don't like what the Senate sent over. I think a lot of people are frustrated with what the Senate sent over. But the question is now, are you going to pass what has been put in the lap of the House Republicans or not?
You know, Jason, I like the House bill a whole lot better than the Senate bill, but the Senate had to make some changes in order to get the 51 votes to pass it out of their chamber, and that's what we're working on right now. We're going to pass this one big, beautiful bill, which will give the largest tax cut for middle income and working families. We're going to deliver that, and we're going to do it before July 4th. It's a little bit bumpy, but that's the process that we have experienced in the 119th Congress. But failure is not an option. We will not fail at this. We will put it on the president's desk, Jason.
Congressman, Chair, House Ways and Means, will this happen through, will the conservatives, like a Chip Roy, will their concerns about the additional spending, I mentioned it's at least an extra $100 billion that was added back by extending the wind and solar subsidies with one little paragraph apparently slid in there by some juicy lobbyists who love the government teat. Will these issues be handled through executive orders that the president can take care of?
The president absolutely can do some executive orders when it comes to the various green credits, and I expect the president to do that moving forward. I think that's a lot of the discussions that's going on right now, but in the green credits, we cut almost $530 billion out of the House bill. The Senate cut $499 billion. It wasn't as good as the House, but at least it was in that direction. This is the largest spending cuts of mandatory spending in the history of the nation, right at about $1.5 trillion. It's the largest tax cut in U.S. history. It delivers no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, tax relief for seniors. This is a very good bill. It's also the largest investment in border security. It's not perfect, Dagan, but let's not let perfection get in the way of a great bill.
And also, I respect Thomas Massie and I love Rand Paul but see, this is the thing. You've had 4 years. The Republicans were so inept in Trump's first term. They were so complete. And then you had never Trumpers running the show. Paul Ryan. Then you had 4 years. I mean, then they went after Trump, lied and deceived the entire country about Trump Russia, which is the biggest hoax of all. Either the biggest or second biggest hoax. We don't have to go into all the hoaxes the past 5-6 years. But it's like, Massey's like, well, it increases the debt. It's like, yeah, that's bad. What do you want to do? You don't want economic growth? You don't want tax cuts? You don't want border security? You have to pass some signature legislation addressing all of the reasons President Trump won the election to begin with, and you have to ensure there's economic growth. None of the legislation the Democrats passed helped people economically. That's why Trump won in a landslide.
Because it is a great bill, and we're going to deliver the president's priorities.
Wait, I just want to say one thing, though. I know the Senate bill is more than $500 billion higher in spending. Go ahead.
Chairman, yesterday we had Tom Emmer, the majority whip. He told us, he said, I got the card and it's going to pass. So what's the hiccup? You got a few people, you got 4 or 5 people that aren't there, despite the assurances. You got a good spiel, you got a good list. But explain to us what those 4 or 5 people want and what is their problem with this bill? Because I think they're very supportive of the president. I think they're supportive, but they want a bit more. They don't want to just swallow what the Senate sent them.
So this is important. Check it out.
Sent the House.
Let's just say this, from the tax perspective, of the 103 different tax provisions that's within this bill, more than 85% are exactly what the House had, and some maybe a few technical changes to appease the parliamentarian in certain ways. It is the House's product when it comes to the tax bill. This is something that my colleagues will care about. Of course, my other colleagues want more spending cuts. Some believe that we have too aggressive of Medicaid reforms, and we have to talk to them and explain the balance. If this bill does not pass, there will not be $1 of spending cuts, and you'll see a 22% tax increase on all Americans. Failure's not an option.
Because the 2017 tax bill that continues now with even greater tax cuts with the big beautiful bill. By the way, it's really interesting. I was on the left my whole life up until 8 years ago, and thank God I left because it's the most dysfunctional political side you could ever be in. But anyway, all those YouTubers, all those Twitch streamers, all those whatever platform, socialists or progressives or liberal Democrats with 1, 2, 3, 4 million subs. They're making let's say you have a 1 million to 2 million sub channel. That's a progressive or leftist. They're making easily $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year. They have an accountant, almost certainly. Easily making $5 to $1 million a year. $500 to $1 million a year. Only in America could the Democratic Socialist make $1 million a year plus. They're looking to save on taxes just like everyone else. They're not giving their money to any socialist cause. Okay? They're keeping their money. They're investing their money in stocks. They're almost certainly all lying to you through their teeth because it's like a scam. It's like a performance art. They don't believe anything they say. Almost always, they don't believe anything they say. And their political ideology doesn't translate to real life. People don't want to pay high taxes. When people do pay high taxes, you have a decrease in economic growth. This is a fact. This is not hyperbole. When there is high taxes, you'll have a decrease in economic growth. Okay, people can point to the 50s all they like, but it's like this. We're not living in a world right after World War II where Europe was destroyed and being rebuilt. So it's like it's apples and oranges. But anyway, let's continue.
We're going to deliver this.
Really quickly before we go, you answer those Democrats who repeatedly lie about what is happening with the slowdown in Medicaid spending and try to fix the egregious nature of states siphoning off money from the federal government to fund health care for able-bodied people who refuse to work. They are crushing, by doing this, crushing people, crushing the elderly and the disabled, the people who need Medicaid. Everything the Democrats are saying is a lie. Final word, Congressman.
I totally agree. The Democrats right now are lobbying harder for illegal immigrants than they are U.S. citizens. Their bogus claims are so out of touch. They say that this is a tax cut for billionaires and millionaires. But you know what? When the Democrats controlled the White House, the House, and the Senate, they never chose to raise the top rate. They talk about increasing taxes on millions and billionaires, but guess what? Over in the Senate 2 days ago, the vast majority of the Senate Democrats refused to vote for a tax increase, increasing the rate at $25 million. Yeah. It's all hypocrisy.
They kept the Trump tax cuts. Democrats kept the Trump tax cuts. Okay? So it's interesting. Listen to this.
Good afternoon, and live from Texas, this is the Will Cain Show, where we begin with a Fox News alert. The big, beautiful bill is about to become law. This was the scene on the House floor this afternoon.
On this vote, the yeas are 218, the nays are 214. The motion is adopted.
To borrow the words of Joe Biden.
By the way, and this is not, I'm not referring to any liberal or Democrat that, is a veteran or anything. God bless you. Democrats, most Democrats are great people, patriotic, wonderful, whatever. The political party itself, the Democratic Party, does not believe in chanting USA. When they do that, it's simply a way. Like you'll sometimes they get a memo like if anybody interrupts our town hall, just chant USA. That's what the Trumpers do. We'll do the same thing. And so they don't believe it. In fact, they're not patriotic. The Democrats polled, who knows about if this is accurate, about 34% are proud to be American. That was just today. I read a headline. I could be wrong on exactly what the headline was. 34%. Okay, there are places in the country. There are places in California, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. There are places, and I could be wrong about those cities, but there are places in New York. There are places around the country where the American flag is deemed offensive. Just the other day, there was two sports anchors, okay? And perhaps the demographic is very liberal, whatever. I think it was the WNBA sports announcers. One of them said, that's why this is the greatest country. That's why we're the greatest country in the world, or that's what makes America great, or something like that. And then, of course, immediately, the person apologized for stating that. Like, how on earth could anyone view that to be offensive? How on earth could anyone view the statement that America is the greatest country in the world, or that that's what makes this country great, to be offensive in any way, shape, or form? But see, the political ideology on the left is so warped and twisted that it's become this like atheistic political religion. Anyway, let's continue.
Biden, this was a big effing deal. Now it heads to the president's desk, where he's set to sign it at 5 p.m. tomorrow on the 4th of July. President Trump burning the midnight oil. Reports indicate he stayed up and was up at 2:30 a.m. working the phones, calling GOP holdouts. But by this afternoon, Speaker Johnson was ready to tee up the final vote.
This day is a hugely important one in the history of our nation. We have a big job to finish, and that's why we're here on the week of July 4th, just a day before now, America's birthday. In just a few moments, we will remind the world why the American experiment still endures today and why its best days are still ahead of us.
The GOP also touting this as a big win for the American people.
When you look through all the historic things in this one big, beautiful bill, the wins for hard-working families, win after win after win, it's delivering on those promises. We are going to see economic growth when Donald Trump signs this bill tomorrow on America's birthday.
And of course, a win for the Republican Party.
I am proud to say, House Republicans, we delivered. Because of our work, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is headed to the president's desk for signature.
And so Democrats or wonderful, morally superior liberals or progressives, not all of them, but some of them might look at this and say, oh, it's so cruel. People are getting cut off Medicaid. It's like, no, we just heard that's not true. There are work requirements. That doesn't mean you're being cut off. But they'll say, oh, it's cruel. It's like, well, what did you do Democrats, when you were in office for 4 years? Literally nothing. You pretended there was no inflation, then you passed the Inflation Reduction Act that did nothing. Inflation still went up. The CHIPS Act, that was actually good in terms of the effort to bring back American manufacturing, but the tariffs are a lot better. And the CHIPS Act was passed because Democrats were afraid that under Biden, like one major country in Europe, that Taiwan would be invaded by China. So they passed the CHIPS Act. But what was it what legislation was so good? Like, I would love to ask a journalist at, the Washington Post or Rolling Stone or the New York Times or the Daily Beast or whatever, what was so good about Biden's administration that Kamala Harris lost in a landslide to President Trump? Like, what was so great about what Biden did? Whether it's legislation or foreign policy, name a victory. Tell me one thing that helped the working class or the working poor or helped alleviate poverty. Prices went up. Real wages were down most of his tenure because inflation was so horrible. Real wages did not keep up with inflation. So people paid more for food, for rent. How is that good for the people that Democrats claim to care so much about? The Democrats now, the political party, not the average individual, the political party is looking in the mirror, still looking at themselves saying, oh, we're such good people, we're moral people, oh, we're such good, and the Republicans are so mean. It's like, no, you're the baddies. You don't understand. You're the people that the average person looks and says, even if they're a Democrat, they say, God, we could be so, we dropped the ball on this. But the average person is like, Democrats don't care. That whole thing, that marketing ploy is over. Most people understand. Democrats do not care about the poor people or poverty. Okay, that's why they don't understand that poverty rates directly correlate with homicide and rates and crime rates. Not gun ownership. Poverty rates. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Congresswoman Lisa McClain will be joining us in a moment. But first, a quick recap of what's in the bill. Here's a few of the highlights. It allows deductions for as much as $12,500 for overtime pay and up to $25,000 on tip income. That is extended and lives through 2028. The child tax credit will jump from $2,000 to $2,200 per child, and it's going to permanently expand the standard deduction. It raises tax breaks for seniors to $6,000 also through.
So what is wrong with higher tax breaks? What is wrong with paying less taxes? Democrats say, oh, the deficit. The Democrats never cared about the deficit. That's why they shut down every state 5 years ago. Okay, yes, and it wasn't Trump that did that. It's either disingenuous or rewriting history. Trump does not have the power to tell Pritzker in Illinois or Newsom in California or Andrew Cuomo to not shut down their state in 2020. It wasn't his policy. He shouldn't even have acquiesced even 1 second. Okay, that was a whole fiasco. The Democrats shut down their economies. Then the deficit ballooned exponentially or, astronomically. They didn't have to do that. They chose to do that primarily to get Trump out of office, which didn't work. He just came back stronger than ever. Every single thing Democrats did to take on Trump didn't work. It backfired. It made him stronger. He's like, Donald Trump is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of American politics. Whatever you do, it's like when Obi-Wan told Darth Vader, anything you do will make me stronger. So Donald Trump is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of American politics. Anything Democrats do literally makes Trump stronger. The Supreme Court, most of the cases, whether it's immunity, the recent cases, they didn't have to. All these cases didn't have to go to the Supreme Court. The Democrats were like, let's go to the Supreme Court. Maybe the Supreme Court will try to imprison Trump or do this. It's like, no, the Supreme Court's like, yeah, you know what? You're wrong. And, the presidency is strengthened. Thanks, Democrats.
2028. Raises the U.S. debt limit by $5 trillion. SNAP benefits will require able-bodied adults to continue working up to the age of 64. and the SALT deduction boost to $40,000 per year through 2029. Now, to House Republican Chair Lisa McClain, who joins us now. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us here today. We'll start with congratulations. This was an incredibly big moment, one that was very hard-earned. I know that everyone was working incredibly long hours, and here you are today with the one big beautiful bill.
We did it, Will. I mean, we delivered on the promise that President Trump and 77 American people wanted. So it's a big day. It was a long time coming, but we got it done, and it's just the start of many more things to come. So very excited, very excited.
House Speaker Mike Johnson described it as one of the most complex pieces of legislation, perhaps in the history of the Congress. It was really difficult. We talked about it here on a daily basis. You worked on it on an hourly basis and into late of the night, including into last night. Will you take us through some of that to the extent that you know what went down? The president making phone calls, the leader, the whip, you working various members. What was required to get passage?
Well, as you know, we have a 3-seat majority. We pretty much knew Thomas Massie was a no, and we had probably about 10 to 12 people that were really concerned with the bill.
By the way, I love Thomas Massie. I love Rand Paul. I think that it's very important to have these Republicans or these politicians sticking to their principles. I think that, I think they're right on a lot of things. The problem is that you've had 4 years of complete mismanagement, and there's a balancing act, unfortunately, that there's a balancing act between economic growth. So you got to have tax cuts. You got to have tax cuts because it increases economic growth. And any lying, deceitful, disingenuous, millionaire, progressive, million sub channel, they're not paying they're doing everything possible not to pay taxes. Okay. And they're making $500 to $1 million a year. And so nobody wants to pay taxes. I mean, nobody wants to pay high taxes. Everybody has to. I have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes. But people love Trump, or they love one aspect of President Trump because it's going to lower the tax burden. That's why Letitia James allegedly had her residence in Virginia, to lower the tax burden. So it's like, but anyway, God bless America. God bless you. If you're watching, thank you so much. And like I said, if you've been watching for years and years on this channel, I can't thank you enough. Hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have a live stream tomorrow. 2 live streams or an upload and then a live stream in the evening. God bless America. God bless you. President Trump is doing a fantastic job. I think that, the end of this year, next year, the year after will be even better in many other ways. Hit subscribe. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great